We're starting Sefer Yetzira. We're up to the first Mishnah in the first chapter. And needless to say, Sefer Yetzira cannot be learned because this is the root of all wisdom, of all knowledge in the world. Whatever we're going to say about it, even if we're going to learn our entire lifetimes, just the first Mishnah, we're not going to get to a drop in the sea of what this wisdom has to offer. But we're going to awaken some spirits that are related to this wisdom so that they can guide us and they can help us. For the most part, they can help us get liberation from everything that we've learned till now, which has enslaved our minds. And so the nature of wisdom is that it gives freedom to the soul. And this is why when we receive the Torah is the initiation that we received as a nation 3,500 years ago into the sacred wisdom. And when we received it, we received freedom, we received liberation from the enslavement of Egypt. The enslavement of Egypt represents all the knowledge, all the information, all the thoughts and ideas that we've accumulated. They all belong to Egypt. They are all enslaving the soul. They're not real, they're not accurate, they don't represent how the world is. They're not right, they're not divine. And so the initiation is the liberation of the soul. And so this is how Rabbi Abulafia says this was the initiation of a makubal. When someone would start learning the sacred wisdom from a master, the master would tell him, everything that you've learned till this day was in order to develop your mind so that you can understand what I'm going to tell you now. But none of it is real, none of it is true. Now, if you want to step into the wisdom, you're going to have to forget everything that you've learned. And now I'm going to teach you the Hebrew alphabet anew, with a sacred meaning, with a divine meaning. And now you're going to step into the ocean of truth that has no end, the ocean of wisdom that goes deeper and deeper into the beyond. And for thousands of years, for millions of years, humanity is going to evolve in order to discover the depth and the potency of this wisdom. And yet, everything we're going to know in millions of years from now is still not going to be a drop in the sea from what this wisdom has to offer. And so this is simply the nature of what we're interacting with. We're interacting with a force that has no beginning and has no end, and yet it's present within all worlds. It's present within everything that exists. There is no place, there is no space, there is no particle, there is no nothing that is void of it. And yet no one can know him. No thought can contain him. No explanation can ever bring us close to understanding what we're interacting with. And so first we have to be introduced to many ideas, to many concepts, to many understandings, not because they are real, but because we are developing the vessels so that we can try to obtain some interaction, some relationship with this infinite force. And so what's going to be used is called remez, which are hints, mashal, which is metaphor, chida, which is riddles. Hints, metaphors, and riddles are going to be used in order to develop the vessel, which is the human body. And when the vessel is developed, then we're going to start dealing with the actual thing, which is the purpose of all the hints, the purpose of all the metaphors, the purpose of all the riddles. And so within the words remez, mashal, and chida hide the letters. In remez, there's a mem that hides in the middle. In mashal, there's a shin that hides in the middle. In chida, there's a yud and a dalet that hide in the middle. Together, they spell shadim, demons. Hints, metaphors, and riddles are demons. Why are they demons? Because they seem to represent the truth, but they don't. They cannot contain the truth. And yet, this is the only way that we're going to evolve. This is the only way to develop the vessel. And this is why the word shadim, demons, is the same as Shaddai, breasts. What are breasts? Breasts are the way the mother is going to feed the child when the child cannot yet eat food. The child who is not ready for food is going to need breasts that are going to prepare the sustenance for that child until it grows and it develops its vessel and it can eat the real food. And so the same way, the remez, the mashal, and the chida are going to develop the uninitiated mind until it gets prepared in order to contain a little sparkle of truth that it can relate to, that it can have a relationship with, that can give it life. And so now when we're going to learn this Mishnah, now when we're going to step into the mysteries and interact with the divine wisdom, for some of us, there's going to be an inkling of truth. For others, there's simply going to be a hint, a metaphor, a riddle. And so we have to be careful with these tools so that we don't get carried away, so that we don't think we understood something. The purpose of the understanding is to wipe our slate clean, is to make us realize that we haven't understood. And then what? If we haven't understood, then what do? Then we learn to be compassionate with reality. Then we learn to mature. And not to pretend like we know. Not to pretend that we have a basis to interfere. Not to pretend like we have the ability to cause damage to what was created because of what we think we believe or what we think we understood. This is the danger. This is why the demonic can be so dangerous, is because people who think they know, people who think they understood, people who think they represent the truth, they are the most dangerous of all. And this we can see outright if we look at human history. The biggest damage to humanity was done by those who thought they know, by those who thought that they represent God, by those who thought that they have some type of a right, that they have some type of a position in relations to reality, and therefore they can cause damage based on that knowledge. They have the right to hurt others based on what they have discovered or what they think they know. And so this is the nature of the demonic. They will rely on hints, on metaphors, on riddles, and they will take that to be the truth. And they will think that they have a basis to cause harm based on that knowledge that they have obtained. And then it gets very complicated from there, because the one who knows he doesn't know will go against those who think they know. Not because he knows, but because he knows that they don't know. And then it can get very complex to know who is representing the truth, which is that he doesn't know, and who is representing the lie, which is he thinks that he knows. And so this wisdom is a very powerful wisdom. This wisdom is at the root of all wisdoms. It's at the root of all knowledge. And it makes a distinction between how can we approach reality in a way that we don't cause harm? What are the things that we can interact with? What are the ideas that can help us and give us power as we are going through this process, as we're going through this experience? And how do we make sure that we don't contaminate our own soul with information that is inaccurate, or that we don't take the information to mean things that they don't mean? And so in order to approach this wisdom with caution, in order to understand how to enter, we have to realize that what we are trying to learn is the very device that is learning. What we are trying to understand is the very forces that make us understand. What we're trying to know is what is knowledge and who is the one that obtains it. And so we're going to learn essentially about our own soul. We're going to learn about the way that we are. And this is going to give us access to ourselves. This is the goal of this wisdom, is that the soul should be able to reclaim itself. And so in order for the soul to reclaim itself, we're going to approach reality from a place that is very defined, that is very clear, that is very accurate. And that's by looking at what already is. This is not about theories. This is not about a story. This is not about philosophy. This is about realizing that we already are. And now we want to approach this being that we are and know how to interact with it. What is a safe way of interacting with what we already are? And those who did this, those who lived this, those who entered the wisdom and designated their lives to this wisdom until it was developed enough in them, until that's all they knew and all they cared about, they didn't allow anything else to enter their consciousness because something else might contaminate that wisdom and cause them to be inaccurate. Those were called prophets. Prophets were designated. Prophets, the Bnei Nevi'im, the children of the prophets, meaning those who were training to be prophets, would be completely segregated from the general population. They would have no interaction with the mundane. Because any interaction with the mundane, and now a spirit is being created that is not accurate to the wisdom, that spirit will be involved in the soul. That spirit is now going to have opinions about things. That spirit is going to have desires. And that's going to contaminate the nature of what's being created. And so that would be an obstacle to prophecy. And so this wisdom is the recipe for prophecy. Those who were able to completely designate themselves to this wisdom would gain access to the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit is the accurate spirit, the spirit that is not contaminated by anything other than what it really is. And that spirit would reveal to them the nature of the truth, because anything they would contemplate would be what it is to them. To us, we will see it through a lens that has many mundane obstacles, that has many mundane spirits, contaminated spirits, that are getting involved in our interpretation, that are getting involved in the one that's looking, in the one that's seeing. It's covering as a lens. It's causing us to see inaccurately. The prophet would remove all these contaminated lenses until he can see, each prophet according to their level. Only Moshe was a prophet who saw through a pure lens. All the other prophets still had certain lenses that were still in place that they hadn't managed to remove. And yet, relative to where we are positioned, their prophecies would be accurate, their prophecies would be true, because they were separated from everything mundane, everything that would cause them to misconceive reality. And so they had the knowledge and the understanding how to interpret their perception and to know the real message, the real understanding, the real truth that they are perceiving. And so through that perception, they have come to a language that can describe the nature of our experience. And this is what we're going to learn about. And so as we're approaching this wisdom, we're going to speak about a source. The source simply means that there was a collective force. Now we call it collective, even though at the time it wasn't collective, it was just everything that is. It was pure, it was simple, there was nothing else. And that became everything that exists. Every individual has that in his own experience. Every individual starts off as a simple spirit, a pure spirit, a transparent spirit, and then from there comes forth all the elements that are going to cause the spirit to see through very different lenses and to see very different realities. And so this is how the Mishnah starts. Mishnah Aleph, Perek Aleph. B'shloshim nesivos pliyas chachma, with 32 lanes, wondrous lanes of wisdom. Wondrous meaning that there's no way to go beyond this wonder. It's a wonder because it has no explanation. We have no elements that we can say, oh, due to these elements, therefore this exists. There's nothing beyond that we know. And so this is the exact opposite of the way the philosopher would approach. The philosopher would try, with his logic, to analyze how did these become. And the wise, the prophets, wouldn't try to analyze what they can't analyze. They're coming from a concrete experience. They're coming from their own existence, which is the only fact that we have to work with. And they're looking back as far as we can see. And they're going to see as far as perception can go until they get to the wonders where perception cannot go beyond. And so perception can reach to the existence of 32 parts, 32 paths, and those wondrous paths cannot be explained any further. There's nothing that we can say if we want to describe how these paths came to be and why did the wisdom choose to dress up as these paths. And these paths are going to continue and evolve until we can explain all of creation based on these paths. Everything within creation is related to these paths, is coming through the dress of the spirit as it was dressing up in these paths. And that is demonstrated in the human body, which is a small world. The human body represents all these paths. The human spirit represents all these paths. And therefore the human can relate to the Creator. The human is a microcosm of the macrocosm of the universe. And so it starts with 32 paths, and with these 32 paths, chokak, Yah. Yah, which is the name of the divine, a force, and we're going to have many more names for the divine, and we're going to try to speak about these names and a little bit why these names and what are the meaning of these names. But the first name is Yah, Yud Hey. He was the one that engraved with these paths. What did he engrave? This we'll find later. He engraved forces with which he created all of creation. And so this name, Yah, is really, we call it a half a name, but it's a full name. Because we know the name, that's the next word, Havaya. Yud Hey, Vav Hey. That's 4 letters. And so first he calls him Yud Hey, then he calls him by his full name, Yud Hey and Vav Hey. If we look at the gematria, if we spell out Yud and Hey, Yud spells Yud Vav Daled, which comes to 20. Yud is 10, Vav is 6, Daled is 4. Together it's 20. Hey is spelled Hey Aleph, which is 6. So together we have, in Yud Hey, we have the entire numerical value of Yud-Hey and Vav-Hey together. And so within the Yud-Hey is already hiding the entire name. So if we want to relate to this force, we come back to our bodies. The Yud is represented by the force that animates the human brain. How does the brain know how to think? How does the brain know how to activate trillions of cells in order to create concept? Who is doing that? What's the formula? The wondrous intelligence that knows how to do that is called Yud. This is why the brain is in the shape of a Yud. And the bottom of the Yud is where the brain is attached to the stem of the brain, which then goes down into the entire nervous system through the spine. And there we'll have the 32 paths that is going to feed the body. And so the brain represents the heavens. And the force that's running the heavens is called Yud. Hey represents the force that animates the heart. The ability for the heart to know how to feel in response to all the information that's being crunched by the brain. This is an intelligence called Hey. In the spheres, the Yud represents Chachma. The Hey represents Bina. And so Yud and Hey are the forces that originally existed alone, and they were the ones that engraved. These are 32 paths of wonder that exist within the wisdom, the Chachma. And so, who was engraving? These very forces that are causing you now to think and to feel. They were the ones who were engraving. At their collective level, they were there, they were eternal, they were there before creation, and they did the engraving. And on the individual level, right now they're doing the engraving. What are they engraving? You tell me. You know. You see what they're engraving. You're experiencing what they're engraving. Your thoughts and your feelings. And so the original force that engraved is called Yud-Hey. Once he comes out into manifestation, we add the Vav and the Hey. The Vav represents the body. The Hey represents reproduction. And so these forces together created everything that exists. Just like these forces together create all the human production. What do humans produce? Thoughts, emotions, speech, action, children. Who is producing? These forces are producing. There can be nothing else. There never was and there never will be anything else. And so the prophet is first returning in his individual experience to the source of his experience. He's getting to know the forces directly from his experience. And then he gets to know the wonder of these forces, because that's as far as we can go. And from there we can know the greater truth, which is that these forces created for themselves vessels as individuals in order to dwell within the individual. It's all the same forces. The next name he calls him is Tzavois. Tzavois means armies. Armies means that there has been a further manifestation, a manifestation of the many. Originally, there was only one. And then once manifestation started coming forth, one became many. These many, we call them armies. Who is running our organs? Armies and armies of angels that were specifically designed for this purpose. And these armies are in charge of everything that takes place, everything that our body is going to produce. Who's going to decide? First, the intelligences. Then, these intelligences are going to instruct the armies. So the Yud, the intelligence that runs the brain. How is the brain thinking? First, there's the intelligence. Then, there are the armies, trillions of cells that are going to manifest what the intelligence is instructing them to do. And then there's going to be a creation of a thought. And so that's the next name, Tzvois. The next name, Elohei Yisrael. Elohei Yisrael is already giving him a context from within our experience. What does it mean, Elohei Yisrael? Elohim, we said, means the divine forces. Who are the divine forces? The 32 forces. But all these 32 forces are really one force. There's one force that is dressing up as 32. And so these forces, the 32, have at their root just one being, just like the body. All my organs are at the root one being. One being is living within all these organs. That's why they can coordinate. That's why they can create one united experience. And so if I want to find this one, if I want to find this force that is at the root of all the forces, where will I find him? Where will I go look for him? Will I look in my brain? Will I look in my arms? Will I look in my legs? Will I look in my heart? Will I look in my liver? Where am I going to find this force? The answer is Elohei Yisrael. He is the force that is giving me power. Any power. My brain has power, he's there. My heart has power, he's there. My legs have power, he's there. Any power that I have, Elohei means the force that animates me. That force is the very force that was there in the beginning in order to create these 32 paths through which he was going to dress and create all that we can experience. And so Elohei Yisrael means he's at the root of our experience. Why Yisrael? What about the rest of humanity? The rest of humanity have taken their power into their own hands. The rest of humanity have forgotten this force. And so he doesn't identify with them. Some of them took the brain. They worship whatever their brain produces. Some of them took the heart. They worship whatever their heart produces. Some of them took the liver. They worship whatever their liver produces. These are called Ovdei Kechovim Mazoles. They worship the stars. They worship the astrological signs. Why? How do they even know what they want in order to worship them? The answer is, these forces are in charge of creating our body. The only reason we have a body is because of these forces. These forces are the ones that designed all the functions of our body. And so if someone, for example, is worshiping his logical mind, everything he wants to do needs to be logical. This is what he worships. This is what he relies on. So then we would say he is worshiping Mercury. He is worshiping the star that is in charge of information, that is in charge of order, that is in charge of communication between the sun and the rest of the solar system. And so if one is worshiping his mind, worshiping his thoughts, worshiping his way of thinking, his way of believing, anything to do with that type of production, he is worshiping a star. He's not worshiping the force that lives in all. If someone worships their emotions, they're only concerned with how they feel. How they feel is what they bow to. This is what they will listen to, regardless of how it affects all the other forces. Then we would say that they are worshiping the moon. The moon is related to our emotions. If they worship power, they worship the practical, they worship money, they worship their military, they worship any type of force that gives them the ability to have influence over the physical world. Then we would say they're worshiping Mars. If someone worships sexuality, relationship. If someone is worshipping in a way where they neglect the other forces, for this force, we would say they're worshipping Venus. This was a very popular type of worship. This was the worship of Aphrodite. This was the worship of the different temples that existed in the ancient world, of people who worship different stars, people who worship different forces. Each one was designated for a certain type of physical experience that was related directly only to one portion of creation and neglected the force that lives within all. One who worships possessions, one who worships owning nice things, one who worships owning land, owning slaves, being in charge of many different things, not for the sake of power, but for the sake of expansion. They're worshipping Jupiter. And so all these are forces that are creating things within our experience. And yet, if we worship those things, we are losing sight of the one who dwells within all, of the power, who powers everything. And then we have less. And this is why they were called Ovdei Kachov Memazolis. This is why they're considered to be violating the sanctity of life, violating the sacredness of the one, the sacredness of the one that's all, the sacredness of the one that cannot be separated into the individual parts. There were those who would worship life, but life on this planet, not the greater life, not the life that exists within all. These would be the worshippers of the sun. This was originally a sacred worship, when it was the sun as a messenger of the creator of all. But then when the sun was taken for its own right, the sun was separated from the one who created all. This was considered to be Ovdei Kachov Mazolis, worshippers of the stars and the planets. We worship the one who dwells within all. We worship the one who gave all the powers to all the forces, and he is the one that unites them. He is the one that organizes them. He is the reason why all of them exist. They need him, and he doesn't need them. He dwells within all, and they have no power over him. They are his messengers. They are his servants. Within our experience, Elohei Yisrael, the force that gives power to all, is the force that dwells within all our parts, within all our functions, within everything that we have, within everything that we can be. That force. That's the force that Avram found after he worshipped the sun. He worshipped the moon. He worshipped all the different forces and said, where is the truth? Who is really in charge? Who do they all work for? He went from one to the other to find the source. And then he realized that there is a source beyond all sources. And then when that source spoke to him, he took him out from all these forces. He gave him a vision where he was beyond all the functions of the body, all the functions of the spirit, all the forces that operate within him. He was more than all that. And that's the force that he worshipped. That's the force that he gave to his children to worship. And therefore, he is called Elohei Yisrael. The next name we have for him is Elohim Chaim, the force that lives. The power that lives within all. The power of these 32 forces that is alive within all. And the reason we give him this distinction is because even if we're going to try to worship Elohei Yisrael, we might make a mistake. We might gain some type of an image, some type of a perception of what we're worshiping, and then we might worship that perception. And then again, we've lost access to the source. We might think it's Elohei Yisrael. This is what we believe, right? This is what our fathers and forefathers were worshiping, but no. This is an image of what they were worshiping. They were worshiping something alive, not an image, not a book, not a story. They were worshiping something that is here right now, more here than us. If you hear me speak, you know that I'm alive. But if you hear me speak, know that there's someone more alive than me that's letting me speak. It's his aliveness that I use to speak. That is what we worship. Nothing dead, nothing that was, nothing that isn't here and now alive interacting with us. That's Elohim Chaim, the force of life. The force that is alive, the force that lives within all worlds, within all people, within all animals, within all trees. The life within all that exists. That's Elohim Chaim, the force that is alive. Umelech Olam. He is not just alive. He is a king. He's a king that has an interest. He's a king that is involved in what takes place. He's a king that is constantly directing how the aliveness is going to dress up. This king is represented in our main organs because we have his name that's written inside of our organs. We have the Yud that's animating our brain. We have the Hey, it's animating our heart. We have the Vav, it's animating our liver. And then it duplicates itself, so there's another Hey for reproduction. And so the Yud, the Hey, and the Vav, these are the forces. Now if we look deeper, we see Moach, the Mem, Lev, the Lamed, Koved, the liver, is the Kof. Together we have Melech. This is the Melech Olam, the king of the world. Everything that happens in the body happens because of these three organs. These three organs are in charge of what takes place in the body. And because the world was going to deteriorate, because people were going to worship the physical over the spiritual, because humanity was going to become practical and forget the nature of the truth, HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave Avram Avinu a special gift. He gave him the Bris Milah. And the Bris Milah is the nature of the divine relationship with reproduction. And the nature of the divine relationship with reproduction is that even though the natural desire, the physical desire for reproduction stems from the liver, but HaKadosh Baruch Hu made a covenant with Abraham that he should not follow the urge that comes from the liver. He needs to involve the higher organs. He needs to involve the entire king with reproduction so that the king has further existence within humanity. A human being that's created simply from the desire of the liver, from a physical desire, doesn't have the right access to the king. He only has the lowest aspect of the king. This is why the world has deteriorated into being so materialistic, being so practical, worshipping Mars, running after power and money. This is because they were created by an impulse that was coming from the liver. And so he gave him the Bris Milah. What is the Milah? It says, you have a Mem, a Moach. You have a Lev, a heart. Those are being run by deeper forces. Those are being run by the forces of the Yud and the Hey. And so your Bris is, your covenant is, that when you do reproduction, your Moach and your Lev, your Yud and your Hey must be involved in that relationship, or else the child is not going to be accurate. The production is not going to be a divine production if only the liver is causing that production to take place. And so the Milah represents the Moach, which is the Yud, and the Lev, which is the Hey. That's the Bris, that's the covenant between the divine and Avram. That Avram will create children that have a heart. Avram will create children that have divine inspiration. Avram will create children that can be prophets, that can speak for the spirit that created all. And this is called Zera Kodesh, the holy seed. The holy seed comes through the Bris Milah. The Bris Milah means that the entire king was present when this child was being created. And so therefore he is called Melech Olam, the king of the world. He is only the king of the world when all the organs are there in order to forward, in order to create the future of humanity, then he is the king. If the organs are not involved in that creation, then he cannot be the king. Therefore, when we're going to be liberated, it says, V'hoya Hashem lemelech al kol haaretz. Then Hashem will be the king on all the earth. Now he's not the king on all the earth. He is the king, and yet he doesn't have access to his kingdom. His access to the kingdom has been contaminated by seed that is not accurate to the nature of the truth. And that is the next name, El Shaddai, the force that creates reproduction, the force that reproduces itself, the force that says, this is enough. This is how the world is going to be populated, and this is how much the world is going to be populated. That force dwells within our organs. That force dwells within every creature that can reproduce. It reproduces through the force of El Shaddai, the force that decides the quantity of life. How much life will there be? How many children is one going to have? What is the quality of those children? How many cells are they going to have in their brain and in their hearts? What type of production can be created? What type of speech will come out? All this relates to this force called El Shaddai. The next name, Rachum, the compassionate one. This relates to having the right heart. When the heart is involved in the production, then there is compassion. Rachum, he is compassionate. Why? Because the hay that dwells in the heart is present within his creation. The hay that dwells in the heart is the root and the source of how creation is taking place, and therefore there will be compassion. If the production is without heart, there will be no compassion. This is why Klal Yisrael is known as Rachmanim. They are compassionate. Why are they compassionate? Because of the nature of how they were created. The nature of their seed is compassion. The next name is Chanun, the graceful one. Grace comes through wisdom. Moshe Rabbeinu asks the source, and he says, Hareini nos derchecha, teach me your ways, make me wise, let me know how you operate, let me know what you desire. Why? Leman emtzo chen beinecha, I want to find grace in your eyes. Grace, gracefulness, is when we are aligned with the nature of what is taking place. And so Chanun means there was wisdom in creation. There was wisdom in the production. There was wisdom in the reproduction. That's Chanun. He is compassionate and he is graceful. The next name is Ram Venisa. He is lofty. He is high and mighty. He is beyond anything that is in creation. The source, the spirit, the force that dwells within creation does not get contaminated by creation. There's nothing within creation that can contaminate him. Even though he is all. He dwells within all. Everything is only him. Everything is just a dress for him. And the dress most certainly can get contaminated. And yet the one who dwells within can never be contaminated. He is Ram Venisa. He is beyond contamination. He remains pure and holy regardless of what takes place with his garments. Shoichenad. He rests forever to eternity. Nothing that happens below him, nothing that happens within creation is going to remove his power, his peacefulness, his sacred dwelling place that is beyond anything that we can have access to. The dwelling place that he created within the physical creation, that we can contaminate it, that we can remove. And then he has no access to the physical creation. If we create the wrong seed, the divine cannot dwell within creation. The divine wants to live within creation. He wants to live within the lower worlds, and yet if we contaminate it with the wrong type of seed, he cannot dwell within creation. But his dwelling place cannot be contaminated. He dwells upon all of creation for eternity, regardless of what takes place within creation. Morim v'kadosh shmoi. Not only is he holy, and he is lofty, and he is beyond creation, but also his name, the knowledge of him, cannot be contaminated. At any point, a human being can rise up and recognize the true nature of what we are interacting with, and he will find the holy and the sacred forces await for humanity's return. The way that we know him cannot be contaminated. Yes, we can fall. We can think about him in all kinds of ways. We can live in illusion upon illusion. We can descend into the lowest pits of hell, and yet his name cannot be contaminated. His name is beyond contamination. His name will wait until there is a human being, until there is a vessel that is ready to receive, and then that name will dwell within him. That name will be revealed within him. That name will give power to that individual so that he can rise up upon all the illusions and realize the nature of the truth. And so these are all the names, and all these names are holy and lofty. All these names are beyond contamination. And the one that's being pointed at with these names, that has no name, the one that's ineffable, the one that cannot be described, that cannot be drawn, that cannot be perceived, that cannot be contained in thought. He is the one that dressed up within all these names. He is the one that dressed up as these intelligences in order to create. He is the one that engraved these 32 forces. And he created his world. He created the existence that we inherited. He created the capacity for sparks of him to exist and experience themselves as separate beings within bodies or outside of bodies. And so through these 32 forces, he made that possible. Through engraving these 32 forces, we can't know. These forces are wondrous. We cannot go beyond these forces. But through these 32 forces, he created, he came forth, he made everything that is possible. He created his world b'shlosh svarim, with 3 books. Sefer, the Sefer, is Sfar v'sipur, with a book, an accounting, and a story. The book, the counting, and the story have many explanations. What are these 3 books? But the most simple one, the most obvious one, is the 3 worlds that came out of the Atzilus. These names refer to the one that is, and even while creation is happening, he and his name are one in those levels. He and his name cannot be distinguished as separate. Like a turtle, Kodain Kamsa, like a turtle, the Levishe Minei Ibei, that his dress is part of his body. And so the same way in the Atzilus, in the highest world, he dressed up in intelligences in order to create, but in those intelligences he remembers who he is. He knows that he dressed up as those intelligences. And then he came out into 3 worlds that are beyond that, that are places where we might remember that he is that, and we might forget that he is that. And those worlds are called Bria, the world of creation, Yetzira, the world of formation, Asiya, the world of action. And these worlds are the dwelling places of the Nefesh from the Olam HaAsiya, the Ruach, the spirit from the Olam HaYetzira, and the Neshama, the soul from the Olam Habriya. And if we want to see these forces in action, we come back to the Melech. The Melech has the Moach, the Leiv, and the Kaved. The Moach has the force of Bria, the Neshama. And it comes forth in Machshava, in thought. That's the first world. The world of thought, the Creator can be known in the world of thought, but the Creator can also be forgotten in the world of thought. The second world, the world of the heart, the world of speech, the world of spirit, the world of emotion. In that world, the Creator can be known in the world of speech. The Creator can also be forgotten in the world of speech. The third world, the world of Maaseh, the world of action, the Olam Asiyah, the world of the liver. The soul can be known through action, and the soul can be hidden through action. The Creator can be known through His actions, and the Creator can be hidden through His actions. And so these are the three worlds. These three worlds are called a book, accounting, and the story. The book is the physical creation. The physical creation is the creation where we see something is written, and yet we don't yet know what it means. It's a book. It's a book that has no explanation. Then there is the counting, which is the speech, where we start analyzing the book. We start discussing the book. We start reacting to the book. And there we see different reactions, different observations, different aspects of creation. And then there is the story, which is the thoughts that we dress the book with. What do we think is taking place in creation? What is our interpretation of creation? What are we going to do as a result of creation? This is all part of the story. This is the world of thought. And so He created this creation just like He created the big creation with the worlds of Bria, the world of Yetzira, and the world of Asiyah. So too, in each small world, the world of the individual, every individual is creating his creation, is creating his story, is creating his life in thought, in speech, and in action. This is how we're creating our small world. This is how we're dressing up the one, the soul, that's ineffable, unknowable, undefinable, unlimited, all-powerful. Just like in the collective, so too in the individual, zeh le'uma zeh, everything is exactly created in the same way, in the tzelem Elohim, in the divine form, and everything that comes out from the greater source tells us something about the power of the individual, and everything that comes out from the individual tells us something about the divine force that is the root of all of creation. Next week we'll deal with this Mishnah from the perspective of the commentaries. We'll try to see some. We're going to rely specifically on the Perish Ravid. The Perish Ravid, even though it wasn't written by the Ravid, according to the Ramak, according to the Arizal, it was written by Rabbi Yosef ben Sholem Ashkenazi, who was a very big Mekubal and had very deep knowledge of this wisdom and the human body and the nature of creation. And he will enlighten us in understanding more what is being discussed over here, so that we can delve a bit deeper and bring this information a little closer to our day-to-day experience. And so we'll continue from there. All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.